Hey everybody, welcome to episode 569 of Constructive Criticism. You might notice this is a solo episode today for those watching. For those listening, it's just me today. We had some personal stuff come up this week. We tried to record an episode, it didn't go very well, and just getting everybody together wasn't going to happen, so here I am. Let's dive right in. Before we start, I'm Spencer, for those who are new, and today we are going to be talking about Standard before the Spotlight this weekend. So, kind of before we get too far into the episode, there is the question that people have about bans in Standard. And, we don't always talk about that type of stuff on this show just because, unless they actually happen. And I think right now, where Standard is at is pretty untested. The most notable event that we had was the Arena Championship, which I think was only 48 players, if I'm not mistaken. And it's really hard to gauge what a challenged version of this format looks like. That being said, there's clearly a best deck. The best deck clearly involves cards named Agatha So-Called written in Vivi. And I don't think that speculating on if there should be banned cards is very helpful in an episode like this, or just a good attitude in all when you think about trying to improve at Magic and trying to win the most matches that you can. Rather, can I attack this best deck, or should I be playing it, is kind of a question that you probably want to be asking yourself. Now, let's get into some of the decks that people are playing. I'm going to go from bottom to the top. Kind of the newest addition to the Standard metagame is actually Mono Red Dragons. I know some people are talking about adding colors to that, but it's kind of this Sarkin deck that plays kind of a big red game and really tries to punish the format with large haste creatures. These are mostly in the form of Nova Hellkite, a dragon, and Screaming Nemesis. Now, this deck is something that I've gotten the chance to play, and some of my friends have gotten the chance to play. It took down a challenge, I want to say last week, or the week before. And one of the things that was said about the deck is that it has a hard time beating the Vivi decks. And I think that the truth is that sometimes it has a hard time beating into the Flood Bomb more than anything. Not that it can't beat it, or, I know that, I think I'm 1-1 with this deck against that deck. I think I have a friend who's 2-0 against the deck. It can do it, but I don't know that that's like the matchup that you're looking for. As much as you're looking to just punish people trying to beat the Vivi deck, in all honesty, you're trying to beat some of the cards that they might be trying to play, like a Braid or things like that. The next deck that people have tried a lot of is Blue-Eye Control. This deck constantly top 8s or does well in challenges. It's kind of more of a tap-out control deck mix than usual. But it does play instant speed, like No More Lies, Get Lost, things like that, to kind of slow the game down as it tries to execute on its game plan. I think due to the nature of Stock Up being a sorcery, though, as it's one of its main draw spells, it does also usually play against all the card charts. You're going to tap out more because, that's just natural. So it means things like Day of Judgment fit into the deck a little bit better than... I mean, not that you wouldn't play those cards before, but it fits the natural game plan quite a bit. Honestly, I think Blue-Eye Control is a fine deck. I definitely would put it in the tier 2 camp right now. The thing is that this deck has to play some pretty big clunkers. Not that they're bad cards, I shouldn't say that, but Overlord of Mistborns does not really fit very well into the Blue-Eye Control shell. But one of the things that this deck can struggle with is actually closing out games. And so you have to play... It looks to me, as that, looking through deck lists, and if I played some of these decks, that, you end up playing more threats than a Blue-Eye Control deck might typically play to try and make it so that you can close out the games more easily and things like that. Because the thing is once you cast a Day of Judgment, Restless Anchorage just takes a long time to close the game out. And that being your creature land, and not having a Planeswalker that kind of controls the board and takes over the game very well. Because Elspeth, is very good at protecting herself, and she can close out the game. She doesn't, take over the board as a 5-mana Planeswalker, so it can be a little bit harder there. This deck also gets to play Seam Rip, which is a big boon to, I think, any white controlling or just white decks in general. Seam Rip is very good in the format right now. It being able to kind of tag hard to deal with permanents for 1 mana is unique to that card in this format, in my opinion, other than Into the Flood Maw. But once again, it gets targeted by Into the Flood Maw in certain cases, so that's something else to think about. Next up, we have an old favorite, and in my opinion, the second best deck in the format, which is Esper Self Bounce or Esper Bounce. This deck is another one that gets to play Seam Rep. This is a deck that gets to play Storm Chaser talent. This deck gets to play pretty good removal in the form of Nowhere to Run to mess up things that people might be trying to do. It also gets to play Subpearl Kirin. And the new card, Cosmogrand Zenith, is pretty good. There's actually a video here on the YouTube channel of Matt Kling playing with this deck just, I think, this last week we posted it. The deck seems very good to me. Cryogenic Relic is a great card advantage engine, and just doing the pixie stuff. But Cosmogrand Zenith really gets to take over games, and then you get a sideboard Kaido if you want to for the matchups that maybe if you were playing Dimir mid, you would sideboard those in. In my opinion, this is the second best deck in the format, and one that, if you're getting ready for your RCQs, you need to know kind of some of the play patterns of this deck and how it's going to play out, because it can outgrind you, outvalue you out in ways that you kind of don't expect if you haven't played against it before. Speaking of Dimir midrange, that's going to come in next. This was what people thought was going to be the best deck coming in. It's just Kaido, Curiosity, and removal, and kind of some dink and dunkers that kind of get in there. It has a flexibility across its 3-drop slots. You can play lots of different things. You can play Tidebinder Mage. You can play. I can't remember the Rat Lord's name all of a sudden, but it has quite a bit of cards that you can play, and that on that 3-drop slot to kind of get different things. A new card that has impressed me is Sunset Saboteur. This is a 4/1 menace with Ward discard a card, and then when you attack, you get a counter on your opponent's thing. But man, that thing just gets in there really, really fast. So and it has pseudo evasion in your Curiosity deck, which is always nice. So definitely something to look at. It can play kind of different styles of counter spells. It can play Spell Pierce. It can play Phantom Interference. Those are usually the most obvious. And then its removal spell suite kind of just depends on what you expect in the format. I've seen people play 1 No More to Run. I've seen people play 2 up to 3 Bitter Triumphs. I think most things are like 2 Shoot the Sheriff, 1 Bitter Triumph type of thing. Just playing efficient removal spells. The thing is that Shoot the Sheriff doesn't kill everything, and you need to know which things it's not going to kill. And you also need ways to deal with those type of permanents. So that's important. Honestly, the thing that I think about the most when I'm playing this deck, though, is just how good Kaido is. I think that Kaido is one of the few cards in Standard that outside of the Izzet decks that can just single-handedly take over a game. The game's over now unless this Kaido is dealt with. It's not going to get dealt with, and now the game is on its head. And I think that is something that is unique to the Kaido decks, that is a reason that they're still around, that they're still dragging their way through this format, so to speak. And I think Blue Black is no exception to that. The sideboard, you can do lots of different stuff. You get access to a null like other decks. A card that really was impressing to me is Disdainful Stroke right now. Just against the other things that aren't the Cauldron deck, I do think that card just really shines. I also think that some of the cards in this deck have been the best cards in Standard in their time in Standard. For example, like Deep Cavern Bat for a while was considered the best card in Standard. Kaido was considered the best card in Standard. People thought Curiosity was going to be the best card in Standard. So it really just depends on a couple things, and you get access to a really good cheap interaction with Annul, Duress, Spell Pierce, things like that. So I think that while, to me, Blue Black has been a little middling in my results with it, it still has really powerful cards, and and I know, one of my best friends told me literally yesterday, if they were going to play RCQ this weekend, that is what they would play. The last decks that I want to talk about are the VV decks. We'll start with Prowess and then move on to Cauldron. Prowess is really good. It just doesn't have the same explosions that the Cauldron deck has. I know that the person with the most trophies actually happens to be running Profs, Cauldron, and VV in their Prowess deck. That's something that I've been doing personally in my Teamer build. And I fully believe that some number of those cards in combination is important, whether or not you're playing a full-on Cauldron deck. I think that some of the best innovations in the format have come from this deck. You know, the number of End of the Flood Maws that you play, the creature suites, and the type of creatures that we do play. Whether, you know, I think Riddler is a huge boon to both of the decks, and it's pretty cool to see kind of getting a spotlight in the format for a card that maybe didn't on its surface look like something to be part of it, but really showed the power of Warp to a lot of people and how good Warp was as a mechanic. And maybe it was actually Hellkite that did that, but seeing Riddler as part of that, you know, part of those Warp cards that do that. I also think that Prowess gets a bad rep because it's not the Cauldron deck. Prowess has the ability to go very large and beat up on some of the other decks. With its secondary game plan is a lot easier to execute. While it can't win from nothing like Cauldron can on some of Cauldron's best turns, it still has the ability to win the game through its secondary plan of just like beaters and stuff. You know, it still has, you know, the very strong VV turns, you know, the access of mana, access to a lot of mana type of thing, while also just being a good beatdown deck. Cauldron, on the other hand, has the ability to go from nothing to, if it has a Cauldron in play, to all of a sudden the game is over pretty easily due to Weather Knight Stories, Cauldron, Props, and VV. While also having the ability with Profs to present a pretty threatening clock across like pretty decent creatures, depending on how the deck is built. And the other thing that I think is misunderstood maybe a little bit about the Cauldron deck is what is good against it. You know, a lot of people think it's a graveyard deck. A lot of people think it's, you know, something else. And the truth is that it doesn't really need the graveyard to win. It doesn't really need the Profs to win. It doesn't really need the VV to win. And that's the reason the deck is so good, is that it attacks across multiple levels and is really powerful at doing that. If you attack one of them, like let's say you attack the graveyard and their draw is Profs into Tersa Light, it's like, I thought it was Light Collar. It looks like it's Light Shatter. Good to know. I think that you're in trouble. Like, you're getting attacked by a 5/5 really fast, and they've sculpted their hand, as well as the fact that, like, they can still just draw into the Flood Maw for your graveyard hate. So, it can be tough. I understand people's frustrations with the deck. It also has really good sideboard cards, and Fire Magic, and all Spell Pierce, things like that. And, you know, now they're getting even bigger with, like, Quantum Riddler, so, you know, even the small ball stuff isn't quite as good against something like a 4/6, for example. So there's a lot of room to figure out, like, how do I beat this deck? What's the proper way to do it? And that's the reason people are so frustrated with it. Just want to talk about some cards and things that maybe matter in Standard a little bit before we wrap up. Some of the cards that matter is Cauldron versus Cauldron. One of the reasons that you might see some Cauldrons, outside of the fact that, you know, you just have VV in your Prowess deck, is Cauldron is actually good versus Cauldron. It shuts down Cauldron. It activates to act as graveyard hate in itself, as well as just being a pretty good card in some of the decks that are willing to do that. Another thing is Into the Flood Maw. You've heard me mention it a bunch of times, but one mana interaction is not very good is not very prevalent in this format. You know, you've got blue-black decks playing Stab, and that's just kind of not it. And so Into the Flood Maw creates kind of a stopgap in a lot of ways, while also being good against hate cards and being able to answer any permanent for a turn. And that, to me, has made it, in my opinion, the actual best card in Standard. And one of the reasons that the blue decks specifically are so good. So The other things that I would say is like you need to be able to disrupt. That's really important in this format. And knowing what lane to disrupt for your opponent is part of playing the games and figuring things out. You know, one of the things that I think is really good in this format is seam rip, for example, and that's because the format has gotten so condensed and smaller things are better, cheaper things are better, that it makes a card like seam rip feel a lot better as it can disrupt mono green very quickly. It can disrupt, it can tag the profs, it can tag the cauldron, it can get the mako. So there's it being cheap is really good, kind of like Into the Floodmaw, and it being able to disrupt the game plan of decks while also, you know, not very much stopping you from doing what you're going to do is really important. And that would be my next thing: is cheap things are important. You can't be going around with a ton of really expensive things unless you have a reason to be doing it and a plan on how to execute it. I think Day of Judgment is actually pretty good in this format, but the better Day of Judgment gets, all of a sudden people are, they're already starting. Spell Pierce is becoming more and more prevalent, and that makes it a lot harder to do something like that, and that's something you have to think about. I think, one of the decks that I've been trying lately is the Brew. It's kind of this green-white control ramp deck that plays Smuggler Surprise. And the more I play the deck, I'm like, man, the game plan of this deck is really good. The problem is like the better the game plan of a deck like this is, playing 6 mana and 5 mana and 4 mana, spells against Spell Pierce is really rough. And while, don't get me wrong, I think that the creatures that come out of this deck are really good. Into the Floodmaw is still Into the Floodmaw and things like that. So you can't be doing things that are too expensive, and cheap stuff is really important. I think that's going to do it for the standard topic. If you have any thoughts, leave a comment. Let me know. Obviously we can talk about the bans if you want to, but also leave a comment. Tell me what you've been doing to try and beat these Cauldron decks, these blue decks, right? It's blue-black, Esper, and blue-red decks. Like, what are you doing? How do you think that the format can be attacked and things like that? Leave a comment. Let us know. Then don't forget to check out our sponsors. We got Untapped.gg. If you're playing on Arena, they're the best. They're a deck tracker. They track your deck. They track your win percentage. You get the premium services, get VODs, so you can actually watch your Arena games, pause it, go turn by turn. It's really powerful and really cool, and something that I recommend to everybody that I do coaching with. And then don't forget to use the Mana Traders. Use the code CCMTG6. Get access to Mana Traders. That's how we record all of our videos for Constructed Clash. That's how I play Modern and Legacy. And they're a great rental service and one that we highly recommend here at Constructive Criticism. If you want to support the show directly, though, you can go to patreon.com/ccmtg, become a patron like Tyler did. Tyler, shout out. We really appreciate it, Tyler, and everyone else that's a part of it. Tyler became a patron of $5 or more, giving Tyler access to the Constructed Critics Patreon Discord, and that's awesome. There's great conversations. Today, we do a daily conversation every day, and today's conversation is about the type of drinks that we drink through a Magic tournament, whether it be water all day, whether you're a coffee in the morning person, whether you think soda's a no-go or a totally fine thing to be consuming during Magic tournament. Those are the type of conversations that we kind of have for fun, as well as format-specific things, card-specific things, rules questions, things like that. If you're a patron of $5 or more, you get access to the Patreon question like Adrian, who asks, for testing purposes, what are the pros and cons of the Magic software we have access to? MTGO, MTG Arena, or even some kind of paper testing camera or programs like Cockatrice? This is a good question. So I think that for me, Adrian, I'll answer it for me, and obviously if Mason and Abe want to leave comments on it, they can. But for me, the benefits of Arena is speed and ease of use. You can just click through games really easily, challenge your friends on them for testing, as well as just get a massive amount of games in. I also think almost all those things are true for MTGO, and it's just about the card pools and your ability to use the client. Once you know how to use MTGO, it really isn't that big of a deal. It's very powerful, really awesome software. So both of those are about, to me, the pure number of games that you can get in, changing your decks really easily. When you think about like paper testing, I've done a lot of paper testing houses in my time playing Magic, and they're very powerful when you get a large group of people in that testing house. But if you can't get a large group of people in a single location, how do you get the number of games and minimize the amount of downtime that you have through rewriting your proxies, changing cards in your decks, right? You do that by going on a client that lets you just type in the card, replace it, and you're off to the races, right? And so MTGO and MTGA offer that in spades, whereas if you can get a group of people in paper testing, there's nothing in the world like an 8-man house just grinding away at matchups, tracking data, going from table to table, birding, working on decks together. It's a very special thing. And then programs like Workstation and Cockatrice, we cannot recommend on the show because for legality issues. I think, as somebody that used to use Cockatrice a lot, it was very good for what I needed it for. But it's also hard to recommend those things now that Arena exists outside of money. So I don't know. That's kind of my answer. Let's go on to Always Improving. Always Improving is the point of the show. Every week on the show, we like to talk about something that we're doing to improve at life or Magic in general. This week, I really am focusing on my health. I'm changing some things. I think people know in the Discord that my work situation and how I got laid off in June, and working for startups for the last couple of years was really cool. There's a lot of things that I learned, a lot of things that were awesome about that, and I am glad that I did it. But I tend to put a lot of my self-value and my purpose into my work. And, I think that people deal with this a lot in Magic when they put their value into their results or into their deck building or things like that. And I do a lot of it into my work. Like, my work is very important to me. I love what I do for a living. And when I don't have a job, I get really sad and depressed, and I let things get out of hand. And so I decided after Tuesday, so a couple days ago now, that I'm just going to change a couple things to try and mitigate that. Spend more time with my daughter while I have the opportunity to do so. Drink less, eat differently, things like that, to really focus on my health and to help me be in a better place mentally. And I think that when you focus on things like that, rather than Magic results or a job, it's easier to sustain and find that happiness. So I'm hoping that it works out for me and that I'm able to get to a place where I get my fulfillment from other things other than work, and I'm able to be happier again, because, I love doing the show and I love talking to people, but, I'm not going to be my best if I'm, angry at things that my co-hosts say, or just because I'm in a bad mood, or if I'm having too much to drink on a weeknight because I don't have work the next day. There are things that, I think that once that you see in your play and your results that you don't attribute to, right? You're like, oh, I could have just played better, but it's like, okay, well, what caused you to play worse? And I think that life has a lot of those too. So that's going to do it for Always Improving. If you want to join the conversation, head on over to patreon.com/CCBG. Become a patron. You can join the public Discord. Links in the show notes. Also, leave a YouTube comment. Let us know what you thought of this show. I missed Abe and Mason this week. They're my best buds. Head on over to all the socials. Whether it be CCMG or CCMG Pod, you can find us there. You can find Mason at Mason E. Clark on Twitter. You can find Abe at More Nothings on Blue Sky. You can find me on Blue Sky at Spencer13H, and on Twitter at Heezy Game. Like, sub, comment, review, all those things help the show out a ton. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching, and we'll see you all next week with a brand new episode of Constructed Criticism.
Magic, magic, magic.